This is Open Door with Vince Robinson. In-depth conversations with people who are making a difference in the lives of others here and around the world. Culture is at the heart of who you are. Know your culture, find yourself on Open Door with Vince Robinson.
Grand Rising, Great Dawn in Cleveland, Ohio, and the rest of the planet Earth. Welcome to another edition of Open Door with Vince Robinson. I am very pleased and privileged, I'll use that word, to be talking with someone who I have admired over the years, but we've never really had a fruitful conversation. I'll put it in those terms. We've had some brief conversations, but we had a chance to connect this past weekend. And in the process of our conversation, he handed me a book. The name of the book is A Dialogue to Self. And I've had a chance to look into that book and see some of the things that he has written. And I was just blown away by the fact that we're in alignment about so many different things. It was almost as if I wrote the book. I'm just going to say that because he was saying things that I have been thinking for a long time, but there they are in black and white. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome to Open Door Mr. Robert Rhym, author of A Dialogue to Self. Now, I was thinking about how we would start this show because, Robert, I don't know if you've ever heard the show, but I always conclude by saying, know yourself, love yourself, be yourself. So when I read the title of your book, it just completely resonated with me. And then when I started reading what you had written, it was absolutely apparent we're on the same page. Welcome to Open Door. How you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks, Vince, and thanks for having me.
All right. So tell us right off the bat, before we go into your history and whatnot, what inspired you to write this book?
Well, I think it's some things that's been on my mind for many years. It's just things that were pent up in me, and I decided to put it down on paper, pen and paper.
Mm. And it reads kind of like a stream of consciousness to me. In ways, it was like you were standing on a stage somewhere, perhaps sharing your thoughts, or maybe it was the opposite. You were in a place of contemplation and you were just expressing what was on your mind. But you just went so many different places in terms of your thoughts, and it's your perception of reality, and it's you speaking truth to authority. It's you speaking to the truth of things that because I remember you were just talking about the lies that we believe, and you talked about some of the brainwash that we deal with, and you talked about religion and spirituality and a lot of different things. But what was really impressive to me was your connection to history and how you talked about things that have happened historically. And you didn't necessarily have to provide footnotes or all the things that we rely on to be perceived as scholars and so forth and so on. Anybody who reads the book will be able to see that what you shared is things that have been corroborated by others without you having to mention who the person was that said that.
Exactly. Yes.
I was really struck by the Vietnam War experience. It just so happens that my dad served in the Vietnam War. So you were probably over there at the same time. And when I see you, I don't look at you as someone who is as old as my father.
Yeah, I was there in 66 and 67.
Yeah, well, he was there in 67 and 68. And I know he went back afterwards, because you wrote in the book that the war ended in 1975. So I think he went back in maybe 1970 or 71. He did 2 years during the war over there. But you talked about being in a situation where bullets are flying past you and you happen to kneel down to adjust your backpack, and the person in front of you and the person behind you actually suffered wounds from bullets. Can you talk about what it was like for you to be in that place in the world, all the way from Cleveland, Ohio, seeing what you saw and having this feeling that you didn't belong?
Well, even at such a young age, I was still aware of that we were the enemy. We were in their backyard, and as I saw a lot of dead bodies, I just thought that these were brothers, fathers, and uncles and cousins, and we were the enemy in their backyard. And I wasn't really patriotic at all because I was drafted. And, I guess you get drafted at a young age because you don't know anything. But I did have enough in me to realize that the war was wrong. So, I mean, and the fact that we were there, I just thought that was totally out of place. And then when you discover that years later that you went to fight for your country, it was all a lie. It was the president. The war started with the myth about the Gulf of Tonkin. The Vietnam sunk a American battleship or gunship or something like that. But it was all based on a lie.
Mm-hmm.
And then you look at who profits. Well, in all the wars, basically, who profits? The banking cartels of the world, who normally fund both sides, and the people who make the war machines, the corporations.
Yes. And, it's interesting when you point that out, because as I was reading that, I was thinking about 9/11 and this whole idea that Osama bin Laden was this terrorist, and, that was the reason for the attack on the World Trade Center and the Twin Towers and all that. And then as you peel back the onion, you see that perhaps that wasn't exactly what happened. So it was, in a way, history repeating itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I would say I would totally agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing that I really appreciated was how you talked about folks who were just excessively patriotic.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I never really I never talked about Vietnam, really. Just very little. I never really talked about it. And especially after you realize that it was all based on a lie. And I didn't understand the whole mindset of people who knew it was a lie, and you still insisted on being a patriot. That's what just blows my mind.
Yes. Well, looking back at that time, I've heard people who have said that, black people in Vietnam were not perceived as the enemy.
Well, yeah, at first, no, they weren't. But until the war carried on, and then I guess we were then perceived as the enemy also.
Well, I mean, if they're dodging bullets that are coming from us, then yeah, they're going to identify us as the enemy. It's like you don't have a choice. You can't have compassion for somebody that's shooting at you. So,
well, yeah, because like Muhammad Ali said, there was no Viet Cong or Vietnamese that ever called him a nigger.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
So why are we there?
Yeah. So I have to ask. Go ahead.
I want to say one thing, and what really put the nail in the coffin for me is when I come back home, and I face the same kind, because there was bigotry, racism there also during the war. I remember I was there maybe 7 or 8 months, and a new group of recruits came in. And one I was paired up with a young white guy from the South, and I overheard him talking. These little tents we call hooches. I overheard him telling this other white kid that he didn't want to sleep in a tent with a nigger.
Mm.
And here we are, supposedly for the same cause. So I immediately jumped on the tent and crashed it in, and we started fighting. And after that, it was okay. We got along.
Okay. So
Yeah.
you had to whoop his
It's
behind in
crazy.
order for him to give you his respect.
Yeah, I'm telling you, we here for the same cause, and you talking about, this
Hmm.
racist.
Yeah, that stuff. Right.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. Yeah.
There's a film out. I think it's called American Gangster. Denzel
Hmm.
Washington starred in that film, and in that movie, they kind of revealed that one of the reasons that they had the war was to get drugs back to America. I'm just wondering
Hmm.
if you had any firsthand exposure to or awareness of the drug trade. They said that they would actually put the drugs into the cadavers of soldiers that were
Yeah.
shipped back to Dover, Delaware. Did you
Hmm.
witness any of that?
No, I didn't. No, because most of my time there were in the what we call the boonies,
Mm.
in the, whatever where there was combat. So I didn't get a chance to really see any of that.
Okay. Well, another one of the narratives was that the producers of rice in the United States wanted to replace the rice that they were getting from Vietnam. So that
Uh-huh.
was one of the reasons that they destroyed a lot of the farms over there. And
Hmm.
then there was a whole Agent Orange piece, that
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, the Agent Orange is eventually what ended up taking my father's life because when he was there, he
Hmm.
wasn't in Vietnam. He was in Laos on a top secret mission, and
Okay.
they were dumping Agent Orange. So
Yeah.
unfortunately, that happened. But fortunately, after a long, arduous battle, our family has finally gotten the benefits that we were supposed to get from the Veterans Administration, and that's a long story that I won't get into right now.
Well, I'm. I guess they in the recent years they just now um, people start getting benefits from being exposed to age. Actually, I was one.
Hmm.
I get some disability for Agent Orange.
How did it
Just
affect you?
what they discovered that it could also, along with a lot of other things, heart disease, and I had excuse me, quadruple bypass. I have heart disease myself.
And this was a result of exposure.
To Agent Orange, yeah.
Wow.
Mm, yeah.
Well, you must be doing something right because at the top of the show, I was just telling you how I wasn't aware that you are the age that you are. And it's not
Hmm.
that you're that much older than I am, but
Hmm.
again, I don't know. I mean, I'm 66. So
Yeah.
maybe you have 10, 15 years on me. I don't know. But whatever you're doing,
Yeah.
keep doing it because it's
About 12
working.
years.
Okay, keep doing it, and I want to talk about that because I don't want to get it. I don't want it to get lost in the conversation that we're having about war.
Okay.
But I will say that the experience that you had mirrors the experience that many of our soldiers had after coming back to America, fighting World War II and World War I. And it was the
Yeah.
same
Yeah.
thing. We're fighting to protect our country, do all this, all of that, and then we come back to America and we face the very same discrimination that we were facing before we left. That's one of the things about America that really needs to be reconciled as we
Oh, yeah,
have
for
this
sure.
conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And what, when I came back, I went into the building trades as a carpenter apprentice. And, at that, well, it's probably still that way now, but it was so much blatant racism dealing in the trades. I think the trades is probably one of the most racist industries in this country.
Oh yeah. I mean they created unions to keep us out of work,
Right,
just like,
right.
they were giving out loans to white soldiers that they weren't giving out to black soldiers, but they wanted to
Hmm.
paint this picture, that was contrary to reality, which
Hmm.
further illustrates what you were saying about the lies that we deal with in America. The book is called A Dialogue to Self. The author is Robert Rhym, and we're going to talk more about what's in this book, but we're also going to talk about some of the things that he's doing to enable him to be 12 years older and still look like he's younger than me. We're going to talk about that more when we get back. This is Open Door with Vince Robinson on 95.9 FM WOVU, Burton Bell Carr Community Radio. Back in a minute.
Hi, this is Gerard Amir Shakir, and you're listening to 95.9 FM, Our Voices United, Burton Bell Carr Community Radio.
Welcome back to Open Door with Vince Robinson and my conversation with author Robert Rhym. He is the writer of a book called A Dialogue to Self, and I trust and believe that this is a book that could make a difference in the life of anyone who reads it. I've been reading the book. It's absolutely fascinating. And as I said at the top, man, it's like he's reading my mind because we just agree on so many different things. And specifically, you talked about history. You talked about the illusion of a place called the Middle East when in actuality it is Northeast Africa. You talk about how this place that they identify as Egypt was actually named something else, and it was not about the soil, it was about the people. Do you want to elaborate on this ancient place that has such a significant place in our lives today?
Kemet?
Yes.
Yes. Well, some of the European writers always have been referring to the Vertical Crest as referring to the soil instead of the people, because Kemet is the land of the blacks, and through the whitewashing of history, nobody wants to give us everybody of African descent any credit for. Arnold Toynbee, British historian. I'm paraphrasing something that I already said, that there are 22 nations or countries or cultures have contributed to the high culture of modern day society, and none of which came out of Africa, which was a blatant lie. And so, and as Voltaire told Thomas Jefferson, that the people that you were enslaved are the people that you got your mathematics and your literature from, your sciences from Kemet. And the lies goes on and on and on. I mean, from the religious standpoint to the development of science and medicine, all came out of Kemet.
I want to read
and the Western religions, the three Abrahamic religions,
yes,
all were propagated out of Northern Africa.
Yes, and so when we look at that, sometimes we look at the Bible as being a historical document. We look at it as being a history book, but there are some who might not agree with that perspective.
I don't agree with that.
Okay.
No. Because when you, like the King James Bible, is probably the most popular Bible on the globe right now. Would you agree? Mm-hmm. The King James Bible?
Yes.
And then you look at how it came about. Like in 1604, King James authorized the writing of a new Bible. And from what I understand, Francis Bacon was hired to oversee it, and with 52 to 56 scribes, they rewrote this Bible. They took stuff from the Jewish Septuagint and the Masoretic, some of the oldest Jewish writings, and they concocted their own story. And then you have people saying this is God's word. I mean, how do you come up with that?
Yes.
These white folks wrote the Bible.
Okay. Well, what I'd like to do right now is read the very first paragraph that you wrote.
Okay.
And you said, I am not a physical body. I am spirit in a state of grace forever, a state of becoming and forever changing. I accept full responsibility for my life experience. The physical reality I experience through my senses are only my inner thoughts manifested. I know I can change my world because I can change my mind. Let us not forget we are spiritual beings having a human experience.
Yes.
I have to tell you, brother, that just resonated with me to such a great degree that I knew that I would be able to enjoy the rest of the book.
Okay.
What led you to that conclusion about yourself?
About that, I call that my personal affirmation. Probably just from a broad range of material that I've was exposed to. Because, for me, the organized religion never made much sense to me as an adult. So I started looking at other things, more metaphysical or occult ideas, and the literature that I read. It kind of took me in another direction. I think probably I really got interested at probably in the age of maybe around 25 when I met this woman, Evelyn Chatton, who I called my first spiritual teacher. She exposed me to a lot of metaphysical material. One was A Course in Miracles, The Science of Mind. It was just so much material she turned me onto meditation and the Rosicrucians. And she told me that, if I looked at anything scripture-wise, try to interpret it in a more of an allegorical way instead of taking it literally. So that just opened up a new world for me. And it made a hell of a lot more sense. One example would be like the myth of Adam and Eve. I was understood that Adam represented the archetype man, the idea of man, and Eve represents the evolution, the expression in matter, the physical earth and universe. So when I looked at that made a hell of a lot more sense than two white people being responsible for the human race. That never made any sense. So that's where I'm at with that.
Mm-hmm. So in essence, what you're saying is that there is truth and there is knowledge and there's wisdom to be derived from those pages, but they have to be interpreted properly.
Say again, Vince, I didn't catch that.
Yeah, I was just saying that there's truth, there's wisdom, there's knowledge in the pages of the book, but it has to be interpreted properly. And you're saying that sometimes we take things in a literal sense when actually it's allegory, it's a metaphor, it's something that you really have to understand in order to comprehend.
I would think so, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to make that point because at least I wouldn't want to discredit completely the book, particularly in light of, the origin of it. I'm recalling from the reading how you talked about the 42 affirmations, sometimes described as the 42 negative confessions and other things that they were called, but the fact that the 10 Commandments were derived from those 42 statements.
Yeah, I mean, the 10 Commandments were, I think, was probably taken directly from those negative confessions of the goddess Ma'at. And I think that's probably was one of the first moral codes ever to be documented in history. And you say Moses was raised in the ways of the kings and in Egypt, and their education started at 7, and it was 40 years of studying the arts and sciences. So he must have been aware, and the 42 admonitions had to be a fundamental part of their doctrine that he must have known. So to say that he had to go to Mount Sinai and get 10 more commandments when they were over there is kind of absurd to me.
Right.
I mean, it should spark the interest in people to look even further before they accept that as truth. I mean, like now, you talk about book banning and wokeism and putting a negative spin on woke, and that was one of our phrases that we came up with, being woke.
Yes.
But I hear people, politicians on the right talking about wokeism, but the media, nobody ever says, what the hell do you mean? What is wokeism to you? Have you ever heard that?
Oh, yeah.
Heard anybody confront them about that?
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
Yes. It's like they demonize people for having consciousness.
Yeah.
Once again, go ahead.
No, I'm saying the less educated you are, the easier you are controlled.
Mm-hmm. One thing that you wrote about that really kind of made me chuckle as I was reading it was this explanation about how the Black Madonna and Child were said to be black because of soot, but their teeth were still white.
Right. And that's what someone said. Why are the teeth still white?
Yeah.
And the eyes.
That's hilarious. But again, many people don't realize that these are the images that you see when you get to the underbelly of the Vatican, and perhaps maybe not even that. There are things that exist in history that kind of get left out. Speaking from experience, I was in Panama back in 2014.
Okay.
And we were in a town called Portobello. And in Portobello, there is a church, and there's this huge poster that has an image of what is called Jesus the Christ, and it's a black man. And then when you go inside the church, you see similar images. So they characterize Jesus as a black man. But when, of course, you step into some of our churches here in America, you see the exact opposite. It just goes to show you what lengths that they've gone through to change that image because they understand the power and the image of a black man.
Yeah. And those who put the white image in understand the power of the white image of that too. Mm-hmm. Because, when I was raised in the early 60s, you go in many households, black households, and you saw three pictures, John F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King Jr., and a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus hanging on the walls.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And who can ever forget that episode of Good Times when there was a black Jesus on the wall and Florida came home and she saw it on the wall, and I think JJ painted it, and he used Ned the Wino as the model. Or there was the issue of Ebony magazine that featured a black Jesus, or an image of a black Jesus, and the pushback that came from certain elements of our community about that. It's really amazing the extent to which our brains have been washed. Robert Rhym, go ahead.
I was getting ready to say the whole Jesus phenomenon, as I call it. People say Jesus was black, but it's still a European story because there wasn't no Jesus on the African continent until the Europeans invaded the continent. Would you agree with that? Mm-hmm. So and the first thing, there couldn't have been a Jesus at that time because there was no J in the alphabet.
Right.
It had to be Jesus, or some say Jesus. But the whole, and I say phenomenon because that I call it the Jesus phenomenon. It's so powerful. It's global.
Yes. And
that a myth like that could be so powerful.
Right. And I'll tell you, it is very prevalent on the continent of Africa. Everywhere you look, you're going to see it. So we're going to talk about that and a few other things because I want to move on to your love for music. That's another thing that we have in common, specifically the genre called jazz. We're going to talk about that when we get back. This is Open Door with Vince Robinson. My guest is author Robert Rhym. We'll be right back.
Life is starting to get back on track, and you can too. If you or your family have experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, try Seek and Help with full tuition assistance. Safely get the in-demand degree or training you need with online and on-campus classes. Go to tric-edu to check out our programs and resources. So, what are you waiting for? Register now for summer classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
Welcome back to Open Door with Vince Robinson and my guest. His name is Robert Rhym, and he is the author of a book called A Dialogue to Self. And we've been talking about religion and politics and some other things, and probably a few rabbit holes that are making some folks uncomfortable. You know, that's the way of the world, as Earth, Wind, and Fire says. Sometimes, you know, toes get stepped on, but, you know, we do have an ability to share as we see reality. Very important, and especially to be involved in a thinking process that will lead us to the conclusions that we're making today. As I was reading the book, I ran across, I guess, a few pages that you dedicated to this thing called jazz, and you identified it as an African American art form as opposed to being an American art form. And you talked about the uniqueness of it, you know, to America, and it's something that was born here and nowhere else. Talk about your, I guess, affinity to that genre of music.
Well, for me, I would think every African American should be connected to that music because it came from the soul of African Americans. And, you know, I think we're losing it because it's, you know, we don't support our own creation. This is our creation. To me, jazz is America's classical music. And I guess classical, in my interpretation of it, is an art form or a music form that's indigenous to a culture. And jazz is definitely indigenous to African American culture. And I will say sometimes people have a tendency to say European jazz or Italian jazz or whatever. And that statement is not true. What it is these Europeans are playing black music. Because we don't, like I said in the book, we don't call Beethoven or Bach's music American music just because American musicians play it. I think it should be probably in K through 12. I mean, everybody, African Americans should know who Duke Ellington, Coltrane, Mingus Monk. They should know those names. Whether you can enjoy listening to it, you still should know our history, because to me that's an integral part of our history. I mean, some may think that's a trivial thing, but I think it's very important. I mean, like you have Benny Goodman called the King of Swing, and he knew he wasn't the King of Swing. Nobody mentions Fletcher Henderson, who wrote and transcribed a lot of Benny Goodman's hits. His name is rarely mentioned. And then, of course, you got Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, which is a joke. But some of us even buy that nonsense. When we know he mimicked and copied our music and made millions.
Yeah. And, you know, I really hate that I can't remember the brother's name, but I did watch a video and see that there was a person that Elvis Presley modeled his style of singing, his movements, everything that this brother was. I mean, it was just
Chuck Berry.
Well, it wasn't Chuck Berry, but
it wasn't Chuck Berry.
It wasn't Chuck Berry. They named this brother, and then
Okay.
they showed you footage of him performing, and it was like, what the heck, you know?
Yeah,
you could see it wasn't just about, you know. What am I looking for? It wasn't just about somebody imitating. It was really about appropriation. It's taking it to the next level. And then, as you said, you know, this person becomes identified as the king of rock and roll when there was nothing original about what he was doing.
No. And what's her name? Big Mama Thornton? Mm-hmm. I mean, and you know, Fats Domino, Richard, all these people. And Elvis Presley is the king of rock and roll?
Yeah.
Come on.
Well, at least we did give Michael Jackson the king of pop title.
Yes, well, and well deserved.
Yeah. So there is someone by the name of Sun Ra.
Yes.
Tell me about Sun Ra and what he meant to you.
I think Sun was probably one of the greatest avant-garde band leaders and musicians of our time. I can't remember his name before it was changed to Sun Ra, but I remember seeing him, a video of him in his big band before he was Sun Ra, and the band had these little beanies on with little propellers on top. You remember those little beanies?
Yes.
Yeah, and the band had. I mean, he was. I mean, the creativity and the music that he played, and it wasn't for everybody. I mean, you have to be in a certain headspace to listen to that music.
Yeah, it is. It's difficult, but I will say, as a musician who's had an opportunity to dive into that realm, it's really liberating.
Yeah. And people didn't, he would be playing this heavy avant-garde stuff, and then he would break out and playing one of the standard jazz tunes.
Mm-hmm.
Just to show you, that he was an accomplished musician, that he could basically play what he wanted to play.
Right. Well, when folks listen to avant-garde music, there's a tendency to perhaps default to the idea that it's just noise, they're just making noise. But just to share an experience that I had with it, I did a concert at Kent State University with Bilal Sunni Ali, who was a saxophonist and flautist in Gil Scott-Heron's band.
Okay.
And we played a Coltrane song. Well, I don't think Coltrane wrote it, but he played it. It was called Kulu Se Mama.
Okay.
And the whole song was in the key of B flat. So there were no changes. There was no 1-4-5 progression or 2-5-1 progression. It was just straight B flat. Right. But playing that song and just being able to just, bang away, for lack of a way of putting it, it was
just being free.
It was just so freeing.
Yeah.
So I have to ask you, in light of that, what do you do musically?
Well, I've been studying the jazz piano for a long time. I never really spent a lot of time. I never was formally trained with the music. I would pick up a little bit here and there. I took a few lessons from various people, but never really studied formally. But it's just something I just love doing. I just sit there. I would have the real book, and I try to go through the heads of these tunes and do what I can.
Okay, so now you're jogging my memory, because I've heard about these great assemblages that you've had at your house, and a bunch of musicians show up, and you're having these jam sessions, and I have never been privileged to witness one. Are you still doing those?
No, I haven't done it since before COVID. And it started out, a friend of mine who's the bass player, DeVere Pride, we grew up together, and he moved to Alabama some 30-some years ago. And he would come to Cleveland around the 4th of July holiday. And it started out, I would call just the musicians that we all went to school with. And we get together, and they would have a little jam session. I would never play. I was never on that level, I didn't think. So, but anyway, we would get together and they'd play. And then each year it got bigger and bigger. And one year it was probably over 60 people at my house, in the backyard and through the house. And I had it up at Forest Hill Park 2 years. But we had a great time, and like I say, since COVID, it kind of killed the spirit of it. And since then, probably almost a dozen of people who originally we started with are no longer with us. So,
okay.
And maybe, someone was suggesting that we should just do it again. and maybe this summer we will pick it up.
Okay. Well, if you do it again and I'm around, I definitely want to be there, man, because
Okay.
it's the stuff of legend. I've just always heard about how great they were.
Oh yeah, we had a great time. It was beautiful.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, were your musical performances, and you said you didn't because you weren't on that level, but have you done musical performances perhaps in other spaces?
Oh no. No, I haven't.
Okay. All right.
And I've been looking for a teacher.
Okay. I wish I could be that person for you, but my knowledge is, I don't want to say it's limited, but I know that there are other guys that are probably much more qualified.
Yeah, I heard some on YouTube. I've heard some of your playing on YouTube.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I tell folks all the time, it's not a competition.
No.
All you can do is be who you are musically, and if folks like it, it's cool. But if not, hey, as long as you enjoy it, that's all that really, really matters.
Right, because I don't do music for other people. I just do it for myself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. For a season, I studied with Ben Austin. Yeah.
Well, I did too.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Jerome Saunders studied
I do.
with
Sure do.
Ben, Skip Gibson.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't stay with Austin long enough to learn his system.
Mm.
I had so many other things going on in my life at the time. I was a carpenter. I had a photo studio. I was, learning some martial arts stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And, it was just too much to try to keep up with all that.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, that was the other thing that I wanted to talk to you about. Actually, a couple of other things. One is your photography, and two is the martial arts, because I've been privileged to witness you doing Tai Chi, and I was so impressed. I didn't know that, that was one of your lanes. And then I see you and you got the sword and you're doing all the movements, and I'm like, first of all, I'm thinking, how do you remember all of those movements? I've studied martial arts myself, and kata was always the hardest thing for me.
You're right.
Kumite, right. I got that. Kata, I can't remember all those steps.
You're right.
How do you do it?
I guess it's muscle memory, mainly.
Mm-hmm.
With Tai Chi, those are like family names, like Yan, Chen, Wu, and Sun style. And my particular style is a Yan style. Yan style.
Mm-hmm.
And come on. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Yeah. But anyway, yeah. And how I met my teacher, I was employed at the city of Cleveland. I was a building inspector. And I injured my back. And one of the guys there, he said he knew a Chinese brother who does acupuncture. And he had been in the country maybe about 5 years. So I went to see him to get treated. And I asked him, did he teach? And he said, yeah. And there I was a teacher student from that point on.
That's amazing.
Me and another one of my coworkers, we were two guys practicing in the driveway all summer, and I had a photo studio at the time. And when the weather changed, we went and practiced in the photo studio, and the class kind of grew. So I was with him for maybe 25 years.
Okay. So not a short period of time, definitely long enough to learn what you need to learn to teach others. And I want to talk to you about the benefit of Tai Chi when we get back, because I know that there's a tremendous benefit, especially to those of us who are up in age. I know you got 12 years on me, but it doesn't show. You're listening to Open Door with Vince Robinson on 95.9 FM WOVU. My guest is Robert Rhym. He's the author of A Dialogue to Self. We'll be back.
Hey, this is Gaidi Nkrumah. You're tuned in to the best radio station in Cleveland, WOVU 95.9 FM, Our Voices United.
Welcome back to Open Door with Vince Robinson and my conversation with author Robert Rhym. His book is A Dialogue to Self, and we'll let him tell you how you can get a hold of your copy. Trust me, it is definitely worth it. Before we took this break, we were talking about Tai Chi, and he had mentioned that there are different families within Tai Chi, and he chose one specifically, and he studied with someone, and he had been engaged in the process or within the practice for over 25 years. Just want to talk to you about the benefits of Tai Chi. What has it done for you?
Well, I guess it has kept me going with all the physical ailments I've had in the past. But I say Tai Chi is pretty well-rounded. It's body awareness, your strength, balance, and I think it's a mental, physical, and spiritual practice. It keeps you well grounded. It helps with anxiety. And of course, a lot of people don't see Tai Chi as a martial art, but it is. The Tai Chi or Tai Chi Chuan, the ultimate fist. So it is a serious martial art, but we don't focus on that so much. It's more on the health.
So it's mostly about the health benefit and not you being able to defend yourself if someone comes for you.
Right. I mean, flexibility and balance. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Every now and then I show application to make sure somebody can grasp the concept of what they're really doing. You're not really just waving your hands in a dance. Everything has a meaning.
I've heard it said that with Tai Chi, you're actually redirecting energy. So if someone comes to you or comes for you or comes towards you, somehow you're able to manipulate energy in a way that you don't get injured, but you deflect whatever they're coming at you with. Right.
You just redirect energy. Mm-hmm. Instead of attacking you as self-defense, you're deflecting the opponent's energy.
Yes.
And one phrase that I heard some years ago was describing Tai Chi was like a needle hitting in cotton.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that impressed me about Tai Chi, because I took a few classes in Beechwood a few years back. It was probably sometime in the 90s. But I just remembered that, I'm the type of person who will go to the gym, lift weights, and not break a sweat. But I'm doing these slow movements, and I'm feeling sweat trickle down my back. And I'm like, how does this happen? How does that happen?
Right. And I always tell people, the study of type people, especially young folks, they don't really realize the health benefits of Tai Chi because it's slow moving. But I was saying that I always use the analogy. It's like practicing musical scales. You practice them slow and deliberate. And when it's time to go fast, it's automatic.
Yes.
It just takes a lot more strength to be slow and deliberate than with speed.
Yes. Well, as you said, it's really about the muscle memory, and I can testify to that being someone who plays piano. Once your fingers know what they're supposed to do, you don't have to think about telling them what to do. They just do what they do.
Right.
Yes.
So you should probably come and visit us at St. Paul's Church on Tuesday or Thursday evening.
Tuesdays and Thursdays and what?
6:30 to 8.
6:30 to 8. Okay.
Yes.
I might have to take you up on that, and it would be great to have a brother teaching me, just like I've had Brother Wayne Chandler teaching me Qigong. I know they're kind of related, but not the same thing. But definitely keep that.
We practice a little Qigong. We do Qigong exercises.
Okay. All right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, Robert,
I've yet to meet Wayne Chandler. I would like to meet him.
You should meet him.
Yeah.
He and Ismail Douglas are great friends, and I know Ismail also teaches Tai Chi, doesn't he?
Yeah. Who?
Ismail Douglas.
Oh, yes, right. Yeah, he teaches a different. He teaches a Wu style, a different family lineage.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So,
but I did read Wayne Chandler's book, Ancient Future.
Yes.
That's his book. One of his books. Yeah.
It's profound. You know, it's profound, and a lot of what is in his book is in your book as well. You just speak it from a personal perspective. Like you quoted the Kabbalion, and when you said the universe is mental,
right?
But in the first chapter of his book, he also explains the universe is mental because it's about the 7 Hermetic laws of ancient Egypt. So.
Right.
You're traveling in the same lane, just like we're all in alignment. So I'm sure that if we had a conversation, it would be me, you, and Wayne nodding our heads yes in agreement.
Okay.
So you've said that you were a building inspector. You talked about being a carpenter and being involved in the trades and everything, but you also mentioned that you had a photography studio and you're a photographer, and I would be remiss if I didn't give you an opportunity to talk about photography. How did you find photography and where did you take it?
I bought my first camera when I was in Vietnam, actually. So when I came home, I used to paint, do watercolors and stuff. And photography seemed to be more immediate with the results that you get. So I picked up photography, and I met 2 guys. I don't know if you knew Gary Manuel and Walter Bettis. We were at Scottsdale and Lee Road, the building right on the corner, where the Islamic bookstore used to be.
Yes.
We were up on the 4th floor in a little small room that we rented to do photography. So I go out and buy a Yashica twin lens camera and 4 or 5 little handheld flashes. And I started taking graduation pictures, high school graduation pictures. That's how I started. And as the time went on, we rented a larger space on the 4th floor of the Lee Scottsdale building.
Okay.
And then a few years later, I went to Cooper School of Art to study commercial photography. And so that's basically, we had, and then I met Randy Norfus. You know Randy,
Yes.
And we, after we moved out of the Lee Scottsdale building, we went to Hodge School, where it was one of the first work and living spaces in the city. They renovated for artist apartments.
Right.
And we were there for several years, and then we moved to 24th and Superior, above the futon factory.
Okay.
And I haven't done photography since probably 2002.
Okay. So
I never bought a digital camera.
Yeah, I was just getting ready to say 2002, that was probably when the paradigm shift went from film to digital. So you never got into the digital thing.
No, I didn't.
Okay.
But I had a couple commercial accounts. I did stuff for Kenna Metals, for their trade magazine, their tooling. A friend of mine worked for Kenna Metals. I think he was a salesperson, and he hired me to do their trade magazine for a while. And then I did some work for Bobby Brooks when they fell out with the ad agency in New York. My teacher from Cooper got me the job to do the photography for their catalogs, spring, summer, and winter catalogs. The fashion for women's fashion.
Yes.
But the thing is, I did the photography here. Nobody knew who I was. They didn't know I was a black man. until one December we were doing a catalog for, I think it was a holiday shooting, and they rented this big house in Hudson, and I'm the only blackface there. And when I saw their attitudes, I said, "This is my last shoot." Because they, up until that point, they never who I was. They never knew who I was, and they were planning to send me to the Caribbean to do the Caribbean to do their spring catalog. But that was it. I had another white guy as my assistant, and they chose him to do the shoot in the Caribbean.
Over you?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I had been doing their work for some months until they discovered who I was. Because all the representatives came in for the holiday shoot. Nobody spoke to me.
So you were like Ralph Ellison.
Yeah, the Invisible Man. Yeah.
That's amazing. It's like they never want us to forget who we are or where we are.
No.
Yeah.
And basically, that's my photo journey in a nutshell.
Okay. So I thought maybe you might still be, wielding that camera and doing what cameras do, but I definitely understand.
Been tempted. I've been really tempted to get a digital camera and start back. But one thing I would say, when I was at Cooper, it was I think it was 24-month course of commercial photography. And so the teacher had me, one of the instructors had me teaching the fashion class about 6 months before the completion of the class. He had me teaching the class fashion photography. And he told the class, he said, not that it was, but he said, you probably could be one of the finest photographers in the city. But as a black man in Cleveland, you would never make it.
Mm.
And he said that in front of the whole class.
Wow.
So I, after we graduated and took my little portfolio, went to these ad agencies, same thing. Yeah, we like your stuff, but there's nothing happening here today.
Mm.
That was the attitude.
Yeah. Well, welcome to the world of racism in America. I'll never forget, before we button up the show, I'll never forget showing up at Channel 3 for my interview with the news director. And he met me on his way out the door. He took my resume, he folded it up, he put it in his pocket, and he said, "Hey, look, this is a top 10 market in the United States. I can get talent from anywhere." Basically, he was saying, "I don't need you." And that's like, okay, welcome to Cleveland. I'll never forget that as long as I live. But here we are, years later, we're on the radio, we're doing television, and we don't have someone standing in our path. How about that?
Right. Yeah, and I asked my friends that I talked to, where do you start to change the mindset, not just in buying into the. How do we happen to end up worshiping the gods of our oppressors? How do you begin to rectify that?
Yes.
And what I was thinking, that we have to dispel the myth of a race. Because if the scientists years ago went around the globe collecting DNA, and it all went back to Southern and Eastern Africa, the simple conclusion I would think would be that the Africans populated the globe, and the environment changed the physical features.
I would venture to say that there are a lot of people who are informed who would agree with that. We're going to have to leave it right there as we are out of time, but I just want to thank you for appearing on Open Door with Vince Robinson, and suggest to folk that they get a Dialogue to Self I'm sure they will uncover something within the words on these pages that will resonate. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
All right. And to those of you who are listening, as always, know yourself, love yourself, be yourself, make today your best day. Peace.
Amen.